Hey. Hello, everyone. Hi. Okay, cool. Hey, this is our first learners event in Chicago ever. Whoa. Let's see. If this goes well, I'm looking at our speakers here. If this goes well, maybe we'll come back. What do you think? Not bad? Yeah, no, okay, cool. Let's do it. First of all, super excited to be here. This is like the first event we've also not done like on a coastal city. So I'm excited to learn about all the different research that gets done in important places like the Midwest, which is why we're in Chicago today. How many here are from Chicago originally? Or I didn't know that Madison was so close, so maybe Madison to Indiana. People live in Indiana, commute here. Hands up if you're from this region, however you want to define it. Awesome. Hands up if you're not from this area, neck of the woods. Wow, just as many. Okay, what's weird about Chicago people that you... Okay, survey says we love it here. Mike, what's the answer? No ketchup on hot dogs. Cancel the event. We're done here. Cool. Awesome. Well, we're super excited to be here. Now, you know the schedule for the evening. We have an amazing talk from Megan, which is coming up next. And then after that, we have a really cool panel. And one of the things that when we were looking at what we should do in Chicago, we're thinking about programming that was really interesting is how many huge companies are headquartered here. Oh my God, there's so many of them. And most of the companies that maybe are based in California or New York, they just have a bit of a different focus, maybe a little bit more enterprise software, maybe a little bit consumer social. This is a different kind of work and a different kind of research, so why not learn about it? And that's why we're here today, so I'm very excited about that. Now, as we get started, a few thank yous. First of all, this could not be possible without our wonderful sponsors who are our annual partners. Please give it up for Look Back, Outset, Dovetail, User Interviews, and Tremendous for all their amazing financial support. Hey, if you're looking for research software, buy them first. Forget the competitors, go with them. Cool. Also, a special thank you to our incredible hosts at the University of Chicago. Please give it up. We got some of the AV crew back there. Thank you very much. We appreciate you. Shelly, I know you can't hear us. You're on the other side of the wall, but we're incredibly appreciative of all your support and all your hard work to help bring this to life. Couldn't be more happy to be here. With that, I think it's time to introduce our first speaker. Can we get a warm round of applause for Megan? Come on up, Megan. So Megan is a senior research manager. What are you now? Research manager at Spotify who's going to talk to us about rivers and... I thought this was a research talk. It is. Okay, it is a research talk. Great. Give it up once more time for Megan. Thank you.
Perfect. Hey, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for coming and thinking big with us today. So we are in a rapidly changing landscape. And I think everyone can look around and tell that. And large companies like Spotify are really at the crux of figuring out how we deal with some of the complexities of this new world that we're in. And we have unprecedented challenges when it comes to prioritizing work. I think that's probably the theme of 2024 is how do we prioritize, how do we do more with less? And with massive product portfolios, rapidly growing monthly active users, more stakeholders than ever, the stakes have never been higher. And it's my job as a user research leader to help my team figure out the right things to work on. And I think the number one thing I emphasize with my team, and I think the thing we'll be talking about the most today in this talk, is really how we drive impact. How do we deliver true impact? What does that look like? What does it mean? How do we focus our user research efforts to make sure that we're actually delivering on the promises that we say that we're going to? So today, I'm going to walk you through a framework that I use with my team to help understand what is the right work for us to prioritize, what work we should care about, and what work is ultimately going to be most valuable for the business that we sit in. And I just want to acknowledge that one thing that is special, Spotify is not based in the Midwest, but we are a big company. So we have a work from anywhere program. People are based all around the world. And we fit into this kind of big research category. And I think one thing to kind of emphasize about this talk is, yes, a lot of things that I'm going to share with you today would be applicable to a variety of contexts, a variety of different team sizes. But companies like Spotify really do have a unique set of challenges because of the size and the scale of the teams and the user bases that we work with. I'm also looking forward to hearing my fellow speakers and panelists talk about this as well at their companies, because I know we all have a shared set of challenges here. But first, I should probably introduce myself. I'm Megan McLean. I lead the user research team for Spotify advertising, and I'm a user research manager. And my career got a start here in these very halls at the University of Chicago. I did my master's degree here. I did my bachelor's degree at the University of California, San Diego. And then I went on to do consulting for many years, working with some of the largest tech companies. I also started as an adjunct professor at DePaul University and taught there for several years. And so I like to say that I've always had one foot in academia and one foot in the applied world, just because I could never really leave academia, even though UX research called to me. Now I am a user research manager at Spotify, and I lecture here at the University of Chicago. Just to give you a little context on where my team sits, because I think if you talk to a lot of folks today, you'll probably realize that user research sits in different parts of the org depending on what the company has chosen to do. My team actually sits within a product insights organization, which is super cool. It means that I get to work all day, every day with data scientists, analytics engineers, and other folks that are working on insights work. And we're all tasked with the same problem that I'm going to talk to you about today, which is how do we drive organizational impact with our insights work. So it's a really special place and a special problem space to be kind of solving together along with other folks in the insights community. So why rivers and roads? I want you all to kind of go with me on a little journey here. So I want you to imagine me working from home on a Friday afternoon, cranking the music loud. I have one of my favorite bands, Head in the Heart, on, and I'm listening to the song Rivers and Roads on repeat. And I had a moment where I just had kind of multiple thoughts of mine converge and crystallize, and I was thinking about the prioritization of my team's work, the lengthy project list that we had ahead, how we were going to possibly put together a 6-month roadmap. And I was listening to this song, and I just had this moment where the imagery and the melody of this music kind of came together and converged and had me think about some really deep-seated metaphors that are used all around the world culturally and also in business, and that is rivers and roads. And rivers are this really, really powerful metaphor. I'm going to kind of hopefully convince you as to why, to really think about insights work. And roads are really what we're trying to shape. So as I was having this moment working from home, I really thought this is the talk that I need to give in this big research context. So I want you to imagine a river. It's more than just water flowing. It is a symbol of change. It is a conduit of momentum, and it's a marker of time. And rivers as a metaphor have been used all around the world, as I mentioned. They have a lot of cultural significance, but they're also mirrored a lot in business to talk about critical decision-making and moments in strategy where it's not easy to return. So in the realm of strategy, these pivotal decision-making moments cannot be revisited downstream. And I think that it's such a powerful thing to actually see a river flowing and think about these kind of one-way directions, these one-way doors that we might go down in an organization. But they also represent this passage of time and this true forward momentum, this kind of one-way pull that the water currents have. And in addition to kind of the momentum aspect, they also represent time. And entering the current at the wrong time can have some pretty severe consequences, especially for large rivers. The other thing that strikes me about rivers, and part of the reason I wanted to kind of bring them into our metaphor here, is that they're a naturally occurring abundance of water. And as researchers, we are dealing with so much data. The volume of data that we have access to in these large companies is crazy. And so figuring out where to start, where to pinpoint, what to look at first from both a data science and a user research perspective is a really big task for us. So I think the metaphor of water kind of helps paint a picture of what we're doing as insights practitioners. Now I want you to imagine a road, and you can imagine kind of a path stretching onwards, yes. But I also want you to think about some of the things roads symbolize. They are a symbol of progress. They are how we get from point A to point B, but they also represent a plan of execution. Roads, in their simplest form, are really how we navigate from one destination to another. They guide our physical journeys, and they help us navigate complexities. They give us a path to follow. They give us a source of vision, something to actually follow, a North Star. And when we talk about vision, we talk about the blueprints of how we should be going about incremental steps in product development. Roads are often used when we think about product development because we talk about roadmaps, and roadmaps are essentially the broken down steps that we're going to take to make something possible. It helps our team focus effort. It gives us all a shared vision of where we're going. And lastly, it also allows us to track progress, know when we're falling behind on something, knowing when we're actually delivering something early. Roads are a powerful metaphor in life, but also in business, because they help us understand that we're all headed in a shared direction and that there are moments along the way that are guiding us and helping us make decisions. So let's bring it all together. Here we have a beautiful, massive river winding along a strategically built road. Rivers, of course, are naturally occurring. This river was here long before this road. They are natural veins in our landscapes. They're constantly flowing, they're constantly changing, they're constantly influencing the world around them. And like insights work and user research, they present raw energy of discovery and change. And if harnessed effectively, they propel us forward. On the other hand, roads are man-made. They are constructed. They are constructed with influence from the natural surrounding landscape, but they are clear, they are purposeful, and they are, paths to get from point A to point B. Much like strategic planning, roads really represent the deliberative efforts to chart a course through goals and define milestones. So while these two things seemingly don't have that much in common, other than the fact that they kind of sit next to each other in the wild, they actually have a very symbiotic relationship. You can't decide where to put a road without some of the naturally occurring landscapes, and rivers are constantly influencing the land around them. My argument to you today is that Insights needs to enact the qualities of a river. So rivers are constantly evolving, they're constantly flowing, and we are really tasked with dealing with this dynamic nature in our work. Our problem space, what our users are doing, what they're thinking, what their pain points are, is constantly evolving as our products are evolving. So we as an Insights team need to be dynamic and as flexible as a river. We're also a source of energy, and I don't just mean that in terms of what we deliver. I truly believe that Insights teams bring a lot of energy to the work that we do, and we are tasked with informing a product team to help make really important decisions, to help know what to develop. And our source of energy, much like the momentum of a river, is palpable when we're influencing the right kinds of decisions. Rivers are also informative. They carry sentiment and actually settle debris, and it tells a lot about the natural world. I don't know if we have any geologists in the room, but they would probably appreciate a special shout out here. Rivers do tell a story. They're very informative, and much like rivers carry kind of these sediment and debris that tell about the landscape, we tell a lot of valuable information about our users' experiences, pain points, and we help inform those strategic decisions. Rivers are impactful. As we've discussed, they shape quite literally the landscape around them, and it's our job to shape those critical decisions as well. And the fact that rivers are continuous in flow mirrors what we should be doing as Insights practitioners. We should be constantly working to push an organization forward, identify new, novel, surprising insights. Our Insights work needs to inform the construction of roadmaps. We do this in a few different ways. We identify user needs and pain points and help the product teams that we work with understand what needs to be changed, what we need to do differently, how a product should be built. We set the strategic direction and tone based on a customer-centric or user-centric point of view. And we help prioritize features and initiatives so that we have a clear sense of the work that needs to be done and what work is most critical. Our work is really intended to inform the most important decisions that a business can make based on data-driven insights derived from our work. So I'm going to pivot for just a minute and shift from our natural metaphors to talk a little bit about user research, and specifically one of the aspects of informing these roadmaps that gets really difficult, and that is prioritization. Prioritization in large companies is by far one of the most important things, and also one of the most challenging things that we do as user researchers and user research leaders. And we need to really focus on specifically tackling the decisions that inform the most critical decisions for a business. Yes, there's a lot of data out there. There's a whole ocean of data. There's a whole river of data. But we really need to kind of focus our efforts on doing the work that is going to deliver the biggest impact and the biggest value for the business. This targeted approach really helps ensure that the resources that we have, and sometimes they are quite limited, are effectively used in order to obtain the thorough understanding of user needs that we need in order to make these critical decisions. And all of this is in service of making sure that we don't get too far downstream in service of the wrong work. Our job is to really help unblock and make sure that the work that we're prioritizing and the work that the business is ultimately prioritizing is going to help mitigate risks or provide opportunities downstream. So at Spotify specifically, our high volume of projects, initiatives, stakeholders is really what presents the biggest challenge for our user research team. And I want to kind of paint a picture of what that looks like. So my team at Spotify sits in a business unit of 1,500 people, and about 500 of those folks are in R&D alone. And my team is 5 user researchers. So we have a high volume of stakeholders. We also serve a lot of different customers. Just, to kind of talk about 3 of the primary customers we work with. We obviously think a lot about our listener experience and what that looks like and how it shows up in the app. But we think a lot about our advertisers' experience and the tools that we're building for them to monetize and to hopefully have success on Spotify. We're also thinking about creators. We're thinking about publishers. We're thinking about artists and how they can make a living off of their work. There is a lot of complexity when it comes to prioritizing at large companies like this. And if it doesn't paint a picture to kind of have an understanding of just the customer base alone or the stakeholder map, I want to draw attention to a few other important things. The one is the diverse projects that are going on at any given time. And I don't mean projects for my team. I mean projects that are going on across the R&D org, the number of product managers and what they own and what that looks like in a very concrete way. There are numerous teams building. So if you think about our stakeholder map, it's quite extensive. There are a lot of different people that we need to kind of keep a pulse on to make sure that we have the right inputs. And I think not only making sure that we have the right people and the right inputs, but also making sure we're getting it in a timely way. I think we need to really think about time more than most other disciplines, because if we want to make decisions with insights, that means we need to be thinking about the insights work before any other subsequent work begins. So us being proactive and figuring out where upstream the work needs to start and how to influence the downstream impact is really very critical in a large company. We also have resource constraints. We all do. I think this will probably resonate with all user researchers in the room. But it's not just people. It's also time. It's budgets. It's a lot of other things. And to be successful, we really kind of need to be operating within a constrained environment. A little bit more about my team at Spotify. I've kind of given you a size and scale, but I want to talk a little bit about the products that we work on to kind of paint a picture of how many different experiences my team is thinking about and what that prioritization and competing priorities can look like. So I mentioned that we think a lot about the listener experience. That really manifests in us thinking about our ad formats and machine learning. So everything that you see in the Spotify app, everything that serves to users is something that my team would own and work on. We also think about our entire enterprise suite of advertiser tools. So we have our Spotify Ad Studio and all of the different components and product areas within that. And then finally, we also have our targeting and measurement capabilities for our advertising clients to make sure that they're reaching the right people at the right moments, but also to make sure that the end experience feels good and feels relevant to our listeners. So serving a large R&D team, you might imagine that all those people, all those products, all of those different layers creates a lot of complexity when it comes to prioritizing, because we're taking in all of those different inputs from all of those many stakeholders and different product teams within these kind of core product areas and having to make some tough decisions about what to do. And what I want to walk you through next is the framework for how my team does that. So we'll call this the Rivers and Roads Prioritization Framework. And I feel like this is not only based on what my team does to do effective prioritization, but it also hopefully builds on some of the metaphors and some of the visual imagery that I've brought to you all today. The first point of the framework is current assessment. I'll go into more detail on what I mean by that. Then destination evaluation, and finally, decision reversibility. So for current assessment, what we really want to think about is actually weighing in, just like we might into the river, to understand where the current is going and what the actual assessment of that experience could feel like. We want to prioritize research with high uncertainty and also anything that has lack of clarity. So by assessing at the beginning and really understanding where we have high risk and low clarity, we can formulate a project list that will be hopefully tackling some of the most strategic questions that the business has. But then we can't stop there. A project list is nice, having a backlog is nice, but we actually need to bring it into kind of an evaluation stage where we look at it holistically and we weigh all of these different parts that I just walked through. So we want to explore the potential impact of each research question. We want to explore the key business metrics and the performance outcomes of the work that we're doing. And one thing that I always encourage, as do all the other insights leaders on my team, is we want to make sure that there is measurable impact. If we can't define what the measurable impact is going to be at the beginning of a project, then we don't take that project on. So we want to know what metrics we're going to move. We want to know what we're going to be able to assess. We want to know what decisions we're going to make in the experience, how we're going to show up in those product requirement documents in order to say, yes, this is going to make enough impact for us to take on this work. And finally, we look at decision reversibility. So I've been using the metaphor of the river pretty heavily to describe these kind of one-way doors or these one-way currents, but it's really important to understand how easily a decision will be reversed. If it's easy to reverse, it's probably not the right thing for my team to take on. But if it's something where we want to make sure that if we're investing the engineering resources, the time, the people to actually build and deliver something, and it's not going to be an easy return, that's the kind of work we want to own and the kind of work we want to inform. So with a large volume of features, customers, and stakeholders, we focus on the low clarity, high risk questions to make sure that we're having an outsized impact and delivering on work that no one else could do. I think that's the most important thing to stress is I want the team that the work my team is doing to really be work that we're only suited to do. And we're trying to inform the roadmap. We're trying to inform this very solid, constructed, methodological, and sequenced work that we've been talking about to make sure that we're informing things like product requirements, design direction, sequencing, and priorities for our teams. So today we talked a lot about the metaphor of rivers and roads to better understand prioritizing research at large companies, and I want to bridge the fluidity of insights rivers and structured paths of roads that we've discussed today, because we want to make sure that the wealth of data that we have and the high volume of input that we could be kind of taking in at any one given time is actually constructing the right set of priorities for the business. So we're marrying up these ideas of execution and delivery with kind of this very large and fluid world that we live in as insights practitioners. We want to make sure that the insights that are gleaned from our work are instrumental to the trajectory of our business partners, to our product partners, because we want to have tangible outcomes. We want to have return on investment. We want to be able to make sure that people understand the value of the work that our team is contributing. And we want to make sure that in addition to having a user-centric portfolio, that we have things that we can measure in terms of the impact for the business. So I encourage you all to try out the framework. Hopefully that will help in prioritizing projects and making decisions about what your teams will take on too. And I just want to thank you for being here and thinking big with us today. Let's continue to explore and innovate and build user-centric products.
Hello. Well, I think we can all agree that was pretty great. Do we have any questions for Megan? We're going to hop on the remote stream and see what they're... Oh, right there, right off the bat. What do you got?
That's right. Gosh, I wish I could draw on the board right now. What I think about when I think about low clarity and high risk is if you think about a matrix where you have high versus low clarity, high versus low risk. We want our research work to fall in the quadrant that is high risk and low clarity, because if it's falling into a fairly high clarity, high risk, it's probably design work, and if it's falling into another quadrant, it's probably something we can ship and measure. So what I look for when I'm defining how clear something is have we done work on it before? What data do we have access to? Do we have recent user research or other types of market research to lean on? Do we have clarity in the actual data itself? As I mentioned, I partner a lot with data science, so what can we actually infer from the quant data that we're dealing with? So I look at those in kind of a lit review format to see, like, all right, how much do we actually know about this space? And sometimes our product partners know a lot. Sometimes our product or marketing teams are actually interfacing with customers, and maybe they have a high degree of clarity. Sometimes they don't, but it's always worth having those conversations as well. And all of those I kind of use holistically to make decisions around, like, is this a net new space that we're really kind of cutting the trail for? Sometimes it's not, but we need to have a really good reason if we're going to take it on. Maybe it's that we need to refresh work that was done 10 years ago. But yeah, I try to have like multiple inputs to really assess clarity.
It's a great question. If you're tuning in remotely, you can drop your questions in the chat. One quick one, can you talk about the difference, in this metaphor? Who are the different kinds of people, human beings? Like, are there navigator rules? Are there milestones along the way you stop for gas? Can you carry it further to the people side of things, or is that I'm just being weird?
No. I love building on a metaphor. I'm doing it a little on the fly. I mean, I would definitely say insights practitioners, we are the rivers. We need to go after the rivers. And I think that when we think about roads and people that are doing the work to orchestrate product roadmaps, we obviously have product managers, we have engineers, especially engineering managers. We have, leadership that are highly focused on roadmaps, operations folks, marketing folks. Although marketing also sometimes comes into the river with us too, and we love that. So I think in terms of the R&D team, that's kind of where that sits. I would say both kind of rivers and roads can kind of sit on the business side as well. Gosh, I'm going to have to think about the stopping for gas one.
Okay, we'll come back to that.
Okay.
It's a pontoon party right now. Yes, right here in the middle. Can you say your name and the question?
My question is about frameworks. The framework that you showed us with the three different, I don't remember the labels, like
So, can I just repeat for the remote folks? Please. So the question is about the framework. Did you guys make that up, or is that something that you saw elsewhere that you modified or something like that?
Yeah, I actually made that up in the last 2 weeks, but it's based
all right.
It's based on what my team does all the time internally. So if they're watching right now, they're probably like, yeah, we do this, check. But I don't think I've ever given it like river metaphorical terms. So please steal it, please use it. But ultimately the process is what my team does and how we prioritize work.
Amazing. Doug, did you have a question?
Uh-huh.
How are you enabling them to take that baseline user survey?
Yeah, so what about the people on the roads? They want feedback from users. Are we abandoning them to the wind, or are we going to do something about it?
Yeah, it's such a good question. Thanks for bringing the metaphor in, too. I think that when you have a long project list and only so many people to take on projects and only so much work that really falls into that camp, the solution is to either deprioritize it or to democratize it. And I know that that's spicy, but I'm going to say it. I will say what I do with my leadership team is I bring them a list of everything on the chopping block. I was actually talking to Alec about this earlier today. I bring them the full list of everything we're chopping, and I see if anyone has issues with it. And if they have issues with it, then we reassess what we need to shuffle or what trade-offs we want to make. Or they all sign off and literally check a box saying, I signed off on this user research roadmap, saying I'm cool with what we're deprioritizing. So when we get the pushback from those on the road who may not have gotten their project prioritized, we have a list of leadership that has kind of agreed to the priorities for that particular time period. But, I also think that there is going to be work that product managers, designers, marketing folks, like those that work with us are going to have to own and help support too, to get in front of customers. And I want to make sure that my team can support that to the best of our ability.
Can we zoom in on that a little bit?
Yeah.
Because, there's the part of the exercise that's very literal in the sense of we're prioritizing this and we're not prioritizing that.
Yeah.
Can you talk about how that also affects the relationships that you have with some of these folks and the impact where involving them in that way has on your team's ability to work, your ability to work? Because it extends, I imagine, beyond just the literal, this is above the list, or this is above the line and below the line.
Well, we want to have good partnerships with people because we'll never get to that first list in the first place if we don't. And so I think there are kind of two things that happen. The first is how can we be a supportive partner to them if we can't actually take on net new work? So one way I would do this would be in that phase that we were discussing. Maybe it's the therapeutic phase. I like the way that you called that, where we're assessing how much clarity we have about something. Maybe I actually find quite a lot of data that's useful to them, and I can hand them over a bit of a, put together a lit review to help support their work. Or the other thing that my team really is great about is we try to figure out, is there opportunity to fold something in to another work stream? Maybe it's just two questions that didn't quite hit the top line of priorities. Is there a way for us to fold that into another work stream where it makes sense, where we're already bringing those customers in? Or is it possible that maybe the timing isn't as pressing as we thought it was? And so can we maybe bring that into another quarter or a little bit later down the road? But I think at the end of the day, partnership is so critical, and we want to make sure that we're showing up for people and delivering that news in person and doing what we can to help them out.
Amazing. Quick question from the remote audience, a really good one. I'm going to give it a go on the name and the pronunciation. Mathieu Donnet, sounds French. For decision reversibility, what do those conversations look like? With who? How is reversible defined in those conversations? He wants to know everything.
Yes. I mean, there are so many partners involved in this, but I have to give a shout out to engineering because I feel like engineering managers are just a wealth of knowledge about what is technically feasible, how difficult things are to actually test and build and ship. So I would say some of our greatest partnerships are actually, in part because we're in a tech org, but also because we've done diligence to build relationships with engineering managers. They can really help us assess some of that so that we have an idea about sizing and feasibility a little further down the pike, whether that be us bringing concepts in partnership with design or thinking about something even bigger than kind of a single feature, a single touch point within the experience, and really assessing like, hey, is this truly a one-way door? Is this actually pretty easy to augment once we put it in the wild?
Great answer. A couple more maybe from the audience here. I saw some hands earlier. Anybody else have a question? Yes. And
Abby.
Damn it.
Sorry,
Abby, thank you. You saved me. I appreciate that. What's your question, Abby?
We go back. Yeah.
Yeah. So, question is basically, how do you make sense of this massive volume of data? Do you have a taxonomy? Do you have some sort of decision-making framework? With this fire hose of stuff coming at your face, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would say most of our inputs in terms of what we're looking at in the first place. I'm actually very curious if this comes up on the panel to hear how others deal with this too. But for us, I would say most of our inputs are actually coming from our partnerships with stakeholders because I think that it's a very human role having to work with all these different functions that are dealing with things day to day. I also think that it helps put a business lens to talk to leadership, to talk to other folks who you're working closely with and understand what's keeping them up at night, what's top of mind for them, what are the big questions we're trying to solve. So I think that that's kind of how we get the input in the first place. But in terms of the massive volume of data and where to start and who to talk to and what this should look like and what parts of the experience we should focus on, I would say like big shout out to data science because we do our best work in partnership with our data science team, and they have a much more holistic picture of that data, and they can help us really understand what hypotheses we want to test. And then we're kind of cyclically informing each other's work where they're helping me understand things in a data informed way, and then we're helping them understand things in a user informed way and developing what we want to test at scale, things of that nature. So that's really how I think is the best way to tackle it, but I'm sure that there are other ideas.
That's great. Maybe one or two more questions. Yes, in the back. What's your name and your question? I think it's a very interesting question. I'm very curious to see how you respond to this one. So Aileen was at, did I pronounce that right? Eileen? Okay. Asking, are there UXR-led research initiatives that sound like they originate from the research team because the research team thinks they're valuable, so you do them?
Yes, we call them proactive insights initiatives, but the only way we take them on is if they fit all the criteria that I've talked about and we align on them with leadership. So, as much as I would love to say we're in a world where we can kind of freely explore X% of the time, that's just not true. I would say that we definitely have a lot of great ideas that come up from our team, from both user research, data science, analytics, engineering. We all have really great ideas. So, we call these initiatives proactive insights initiatives because we're the ones that are saying, hey, look at this data point. Hey, look at this open question we left research with. Is this worth exploring? And if we can get the buy-in and actually identify who's the team that's going to go do something with it and what decisions are going to be made and what, OKRs are we informing? If we can do all of that, then we take it on.
Awesome. Maybe one final question. Gentleman in the back has been very patient. Jake? Yeah, you. So the question is basically, how do you size the work? How, I guess, how much work is going to go into answering a question or pursuing a particular project? Is that right? All right, Megan.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, at Spotify, we work in a 2-week sprint model. So I try to make sure that our timelines are actually captured in that way. But if we were dealing with engineering sizes, probably most things would be a large, right? That's just the reality of questions that are fitting into the strategic bucket. However, we're always looking for opportunities to kind of keep our ear to the ground and do insights work that is quick turnaround and low lift, that still kind of fits those criteria of high impact, high risk, low clarity. Someone on my team just led a really amazing survey that we turned around in like 3 weeks, end to end. I would consider that a small effort, but for the most part, most of what's falling into this quadrant that I've described is going to be kind of technically a large from like an engineering sprint model perspective. What I try to do with our leadership team to paint a picture of why we need the time is to really describe like what we're doing, what deliverables we're going to have, what questions we're going to answer, what decisions we're going to make. That's what they care more about than they do the actual amount of time spent. And I also want to make sure that we're always meeting the timelines of what that work is informing, right? So if a product team needs an answer, we want to meet that timeline. That may mean we have to scale back in certain areas.
Awesome. Please give a very warm round of applause to Megan for this amazing talk.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay, coming up next, we have a panel. We are going to take a very brief break to get set up. For the folks who are here at home, in person, I want you to look to your left and right. Hands up if there's somebody next to you don't know on one side. Hand up if it's two people you don't know. Two hands up if there's two people you don't know. I'm going to reach across, and we're going to shake their hand and introduce ourselves and make one new friend. Maybe two. Amazing. And we're back. I'm very excited about this panel because we've got a bunch of super awesome research leaders here who represent a variety of companies, which I think is really exciting. And on top of that, because they all work at the companies they work at, there's probably going to be quite a range of perspectives and a range of things to learn here, because even though you all work at very large companies, I have a feeling it's going to be quite different at each one. So we'll see. Before we do that, I'd love to get each of you to quickly introduce yourself. Jennifer, maybe we can start with you.
Sure. Hi, my name's Jennifer Sejak, and I lead the user experience research team at Tapestry, which is the parent company of Coach, Kate Spade, and Stuart Weitzman. So happy to be here.
Awesome. Brad.
Everyone, I'm Brad Carrera. I'm a UXR research manager over at McDonald's, and I focus mostly on the customer-facing stuff, but wander my way into the kitchen and back of the house, probably more often than they want me to.
Hi, my name's Nicole Hill. I work at Microsoft. I'm a research manager on SharePoint, part of the collaborative apps part of the organization.
Awesome. So I think to kick things off, I think it's important for us to kind of think about high-level overview of what it's like doing research in an organization this large, because obviously I don't think it's possible to do research on everything. I think McDonald's, what is it, 1 billion customers a year or something like that? What is it? Microsoft is probably close to that.
I can't tell you across all of Microsoft, but I would say SharePoint, a couple 100,000 monthly active users.
Gotcha. And then who knows how many people buy handbags? I mean, you probably do, but I definitely
100
don't.
100 million, not
100.
not 100,000.
But yeah, so let's start with that, because maybe Jennifer, tell me a bit about when you're in an organization as large as this is. How big is your research team, and what's kind of like the vibe around curiosity around research, and what it's like just working within kind of like a behemoth organization like that?
Sure. So one thing I would mention first is just because it's a large company doesn't mean necessarily that there's a large UX research team. So the way that Tapestry is set up, the tech kind of digital part of the company kind of operates, I would say, with a startup-y vibe. That would be the vibe. So it's very like quick turnaround. And I'd say we're not afraid to do scrappy research when needed, which I don't know that everybody would associate that with a Fortune 500 company, but certainly that's the case for us. The UX research team at Tapestry, 4 of us total, including myself.
Holy smokes.
Yeah.
I'm going to pass it to Brad, because I know I already asked you this question. How big is the research team at McDonald's?
Yeah, so we have 3, and I'll call it 4. We have a rotational employee who's with us for a few months, and she's going to be moving off, but brand new to UXR, so just started with us.
That's like a legendary researcher to customer ratio, the likes of which we may never see again.
Thank you. I think
So each one of you is responsible for 250 million customers to research, right?
yeah, more or less.
More or less.
Yeah,
Okay,
we
cool.
have to make sure we're hitting
Just
those
wanna clarify
benchmarks
that.
and talking to them. Yeah, but yeah, we're split up across some different focus points, but yeah, 3 of us full time right now.
Awesome. And Nicole, like your company is a little bit more technically oriented because it's Microsoft.
I can't tell you how many UXRs are across the entire organization. I can just speak for my boss's org. So I mentioned I'm on SharePoint. We also have Teams and then OneDrive. They're about, I think there's like any given moment, 30 to 40 of us. So I have 3 people on my team, and then there are 5 managers under my boss. So we are kind of like a tight-knit family where we work really closely together, not necessarily collaborating across research, but sharing resources, knowledge, things like that.
So this is a good transition point, because again, with such a large customer base, you have to have some kind of way to slice and dice to make it manageable, right? So can you talk a bit about how, whether it's within SharePoint specifically or more broadly within Microsoft, how do you think about segmenting, whether it's customers or which groups of people to focus on? How does that kind of process of, all right, this is the group we're looking at today or this month or this quarter?
Yeah, it's complicated. So like SharePoint is 40 years old, but some of the products that I work on are new. So I have the large scale products, if you think about SharePoint as an authoring internet platform or as a content management system for files. But I work on some new AI products too that like how can we extract information from files, and their user base is really quite small. It's more challenging than what you think. Couple things. There are a lot of customer facing people. So it's not just us as researchers. In the enterprise space, you have these adoption technical sale people on like brand new products. They know a lot, sometimes even more than what we do in the day to day. They're out there mapping scenarios and trying to understand like how they can solve customer problems. So they can be incredibly helpful. We have data science that we partner with, and luckily on all of my areas, we have a data science partner who's embedded, so we can look at what's happening in large scale in our product and say, hey, maybe there's something going on here. This is a great opportunity to partner with us doing primarily qualitative research. And then, you know, there's other types of customer programs, some run by product, some are run by more of those adoption people. So there's really a lot of people who have customer insights, and really working together to triangulate is important to have a really good understanding of what's happening in the space.
So it sounds like figuring out where to focus is really a result of working with different knowledge experts within your function.
And I think it also depends on what kind of work we're taking on, right? Are we trying to do some initial research because we're building something new? There's a lot of unknowns, just like in the talk, like what's the risk, what's the clarity? That may be totally different work. Or are we trying to understand, you know, what's going on in SharePoint authoring, which is, you know, huge user base. I think there's like, just heard 500,000 sites built a day. It really depends on what we're trying to understand here, right? And all the way from like, we're very involved in the craft of our product too. So research is involved anytime we ship something cross-functionally to evaluate the experience before it goes out the door. So there's a lot of things we do across the spectrum of research.
Interesting. Jennifer, in your experience, does that track, or is there a different way that you kind of focus in on a customer segment or something like that to decide really who you should be talking to, I guess?
Yeah, so we work really closely with our brand stakeholders. So sometimes you might hear the term like business stakeholder. So that's basically the same thing here. So we're working with technically 5 different brands. So you have Coach, Coach Outlet, Kate Spade Outlet, and Stuart Weitzman. And then within each one of those brands, they have their target segments, as well as, you know, your kind of core customer as well. It should come as no surprise that our brands are very focused on Gen Z. So that is a really common segment that we focus in on for our research, but also not just Gen Z in general, but thinking about, you know, is this person an actual prospective customer? Like what kind of purchase behaviors have they had in the past in terms of how much they've spent on a bag? Do they have, you know, negative sentiment towards the Coach brand, you know, things like that. So just your overall like principles for writing a good screener definitely apply here as well. I hope that answers your question.
For sure.
Yeah.
Brad, with one researcher for every 250 million customers, how do you decide who to talk to?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, a lot of it comes from what are our bottom line business goals. Are we pushing to acquisition plays? Are we pushing retention plays? Things like that. So that's kind of the first question that I challenge our product managers to answer for me. Who is this for? There's a big fallacy around, you know, we're McDonald's, everything is for everyone all the time. It has to be. So it's just having those kind of critical thinking conversation. Tell me about who this person is. Why does it provide them value? How does it provide them value? You know, what are they doing currently? So it's just trying to double click again, see what data is available, and get to kind of our most narrow point possible to get a small singular project out the door.
Can you tell me a bit about it from your perspective? Obviously, a lot of the time when we're doing UX research, when we're doing stuff that's qualitative and oriented, it's very pinpoint. You know, talking to X number of people, that number is usually pretty small, and we're spending most of our thinking time thinking about whatever the project that is. How do we also maintain a perspective of what's going on with the overall customer base, the overall business at the same time? Is there certain traditions or rituals that you have in place that help you maintain that perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a big part of it and a big push from our leadership who's been super helpful. I mean, from our senior VP, Joshua Slosser, to our VP, Tim Clouda, senior directors, they've all just leaned completely in to this kind of design thinking, human-centered design kind of approach, as opposed to before it was more of a, okay, a market wants this thing. What are the requirements? Make the thing happen for the market, and then we'll move on to the next thing. So I think a big part of it is just to like really understand, why are we doing this? Who are we doing this for? And kind of go from there and make sure that we're all aligned on kind of moving forward with a very specific kind of piece of it.
Jennifer, does that track for you as well? Like, are there, are you having like regular syncs with the marketing leadership or the data science team? Is that something you do? Do you have access to certain dashboards where you're like, hey, researchers, we're looking at these every week and trying to understand what the heck is going on? Because even though we're focused on, you know, measuring this flow, there's still a broader picture we need to be aware of.
So similar to what Megan was saying in her talk, the amount of data available is it's crazy. It's overwhelming. There's definitely key dashboards that we look at. I would say for us, we've been really focused on, and what you said about double clicking in again and again, that really resonated with me. So in terms of, let's say, okay, we're interested in Gen Z, but within that, right, you could be coming from a paid social media ad. Okay. Within that, is the paid social media ad focusing on a specific product or some sort of collection? All right. Those are going to take you to different types of pages. Then within that, what is the user's goal and mindset? That, you know, and it keeps going and going and going. So in terms of then applying these kind of bigger dashboards and everything to that, I would say we're really zooming into specific parts of them to make sure that we're focusing on flows that are going to have the most impact, like the most people are going down those paths. And then in terms of, you know, regularly keeping up with what's happening with the customer, I would say we meet pretty regularly with, we have a voice of the customer team who handles surveys and everything for our site. And so they are constantly keeping a pulse on, you know, at a quantitative scale, what kind of the big customer issues are. We've post-purchase surveys. We have a ton of custom dashboard tools. It goes on and on.
Seems like a lot.
Yeah, but
like a full-time
no
job.
mandatory, like, you know, look at this every week or anything like that.
Got it.
Yeah.
I'll just add, I think, you know, we are primarily qualitative researchers, so working closely with data science, they're obviously going to be the expert of their domain. We happen to have some regular meetings, cross-functional business meetings that roll up to our products, typically on a monthly basis. And sometimes we'll find really strange things in the data that they can't explain. And so in one recent case, we actually did some research. We have these monthly like customer calls with some of our biggest customers, and we brought that interesting data point to one of those conversations to try to understand. And we followed up with some additional research as well, including at the conference that I was just at last week. We have our Microsoft conference. So there's often, I think it works best when there's a partnership between qualitative and quantitative data. And sometimes even, again, that those customer adoption people. One person on my team worked across data science and customer adoption to really understand for a very new product, like what is driving adoption, what are the challenges for customers. So really those partnerships, looking at people who are also customer data folks, can be super invaluable to help you focus and provide an answer that each of the disciplines in itself probably couldn't have come to. So it's really important.
Let's follow up on this a little bit, because it sounds like clearly a theme for the night is partnership. I think we've said that about 400 times, which is great, because I think that's one of the big takeaways, I think, for anybody that's doing research in this kind of situation, because there's only so much that one human can know. And when you have more of them and they're all doing smart things, right? You know, what did you learn, right? One of the things for people who are maybe transitioning either from a smaller company or maybe a startup or an agency, or maybe they're a graduate student who's trying to figure out their first role. Can you talk to me about what do you think some of the biggest challenges they're going to face kind of transitioning into an organization like Microsoft, so big, whatever? What are those big things that, you know, you're going to want to address those challenges head on?
Yeah, Microsoft was very different for me. I was coming from Groupon. I used to work for Malia right there. She's awesome.
What's up, Malia? Hey.
A much smaller team. What was there, like no more than 4 or 5 at any given time? And then you go, and Malia probably can tell you some interesting things about going to Walmart next. You go to a company like Microsoft, and some people have been working there 10, 20 years, their entire career. So relationships are very important. There's so much legacy knowledge.
Can we pause on that one
Okay.
real quick? Because we've said relationship, partnership a lot. When you came to Microsoft, was it 3-4 years ago, something like that now?
The 2.5 years.
Ballpark?
about,
Okay.
a little bit.
2.5 years ago. How did you start forging those relationships? Because some, like you said,
Yeah.
some of them have been working there for 20 years. They're like best buds, I guess, right? You know, or they
Yeah.
hate each other and they can't. But for you, you got to become their
bit of
friends,
everything.
right?
It's interesting too because I'm remote, right? I came at a moment where there was a lot more flexibility about being in different locations, and then Microsoft was investing in certain places like Atlanta. So I'm working from my living room most of the days over Teams. I think part of it is being willing to reach out to people and know that people are friendly. They're willing to help you if you ping them or you set up some time, and just trying to get to know people is important. It's not all work, by the way. I strongly believe in starting with like a personal relationship. People know, everyone knows I love to dance tango and samba and all this other stuff. And it's important to understand what their passions are too. And yeah, it's just a huge organization. When you think you know something, you don't know something. There's so much to know. There are different roles. It's really important to find that time to get to know people and not be afraid to ask for help or to just reach out to someone and just say, hey, I would love to talk with you and have a coffee and get to know what you do a little bit more. It's super important. And then I have a wonderful boss. She's one of those people who've been there for 20 years. And so she knows everyone, and just relying on my larger team to help me find the people I need to answer.
Yeah, so making time for the personal stuff for sure,
Absolutely.
and then also leveraging the other folks around you to help you find that right person to connect with.
Yes, 100%.
Jennifer, what do you think are some of the bigger challenges for somebody that's transitioning into an organization like this?
Yeah. So when I first started at Tapestry, so before that, I was at a small privately owned company, right? And then going into Fortune 500, it was like, okay, this is very different. And then also
What was so different about it? What was like the shock part for you? Where you're like, oh
there's
my god,
so many people. Like it was just like, oh, cool, this person does consumer insights. I will talk to them. Great. Oh, there's another insights group over here too. Okay, great. I'll talk to them. Awesome. I think I know everybody now. Nope. There's another insights group over here. Oh, there's a data science over here, analytics over here. It just kept going. And I would joke like, yeah, every week there's another person I learn about that that I should know. So I think a weird piece of advice actually is to kind of like study the org chart if there's a like online kind of tool at the company where you can
what
do
would you
that.
look for? So let's say you join, what's that, Walmart, right? Well, maybe that's a terrible example. You have like 2 million employees. That's too many. You join a different large company, right? You get the org chart. What are you looking for?
Titles, but sometimes titles can be really
What kind of
vague
titles?
and misleading.
Yeah.
Like for example, I might see something. It's like, oh, this person has omni in their name, omni-channel journey, right? Oh, this person's gonna have so much in common with me. And it's like, oh wait, no, it's a marketing person actually, right? And then somebody else has something vague like strategy in their name, which could mean anything, right? And it's like, oh no, actually they do a lot of consumer insights research. So I'd say asking questions about what those teams are so that you're not just like ruling out some potential relationship because the title wasn't clear. So just like you were saying, like talking to your boss about like, hey, who should I know, right? But I think sometimes you also need to do your own homework too. So not gonna lie, some LinkedIn creeping is helpful. Seeing, okay, this person does do research. Like it's kind of like if you are doing consulting, right? You're going to do some research to understand your client. You should think of like other stakeholders at your company as potential clients too, right? You want to understand what their needs are, who they are, what that partnership could be. So, anyways,
Yeah.
overall, get to know people. Don't be afraid to reach out. And then it's also really helpful to have someone else introduce you to the person when possible. So it's not like, who is this random person sending me
Right.
a Zoom invite?
Yeah. Maybe not the first thing you do on your first day is
No.
just fire off the Zoom invites, but
Yeah.
nice. Be more strategic. Brad, what do you think is a big challenge for anybody that's doing the transition into this?
Yeah, I mean, I fired off some invites first day, second day.
Hell yeah.
And it was
Guns
all good,
a-blazing.
so don't be too afraid of it. So what are some things that people, I mean, I don't want to be cliche, but the relationship part is it's the biggest part. The advice that I give to people that join our team is to just systematize how you do your relationship building. Commit to a chunk of your week, an amount of time that you are going to nurture a relationship, that you're going to build a new one.
So you're a manager. You have a few people on your team, right?
Mhm,
And you
mhm.
want them to go build those relationships. What do the conversations look like for you when you have a direct report who you want to go and build those relationships, but maybe they're maybe a little bit stuck in the mud, or it's just not progressing as much? What do you ask them about? How do you poke them to get going?
Luckily, I haven't run into that yet, to be honest with you. I mean,
Go work for Brad, everyone.
The
You'll find
people
great
that we work
success. This is
for,
good.
they're doing it. They're making it happen, and haven't run into that problem. And I think the environment that we work in, it can be intimidating, especially there's McDonald's lifers who've been there for 40 years and up. There's, the intimidating people who are actually really nice that work on the 9th floor that you're not allowed to book, a conference room in. But just, I guess my push to those people that might be a little bit apprehensive is just one, it doesn't always have to be same level. You don't always have to just meet with other managers. Ping that director and say, hey, I think there's something, interesting that I might have to share with you. I'd love to hear more about what you could do, how I can help, provide, value. Inevitably, you're going to have to ask for something at some point. And they're probably going to have to ask you too. So it's really just what can you give to that relationship before you're just taken kind of out of it too.
Do any of you have a story where you ping someone really, really senior that you're like, I don't know if they're going to get back to me, and then you had a great conversation with them?
I think people are pretty open. I was going to say, I was going to add one more thing that I just forgot. I always ask people about, well, two things. What their experience and path has been in Microsoft, because they could be in totally different sides of the business, and that's super helpful. But also, what is their relationship to research? Don't assume just because you're at Microsoft that this person has ever partnered with the researcher, knows what we do or bring to the table. And so helping them understand, they usually have questions about how we work and what the expectations are, that I find is valuable. And that's something I try to tell my team too. Sometimes as researchers we get frustrated if we don't like the way our partners are working, but I have to remind them, like, they may not have worked with research before. So just trying to understand where they're coming from and help them understand like what we can bring to the table, and then learning about them. Super valuable. And sorry, I think you asked me another question that I may not have.
No, that would. Did you ever hit somebody up at a very senior level where they just like opened a door for you, blew your mind about something, and it went great?
I'm trying to think of the most senior person. So much of what I'm working on is new spaces, so just getting to know the folks there. But it is huge. I would say I did some of the Copilot research, even though it wasn't under SharePoint, pretty early. So we were working with people across different parts of the org. Just feeling like you can connect and reach out to people. I've never had a negative experience. Everyone has been super welcoming.
There's the takeaway right there.
Valuable, so.
Never goes bad. Just
it doesn't.
Slack DM the CEO.
I mean, the worst thing that could happen is someone is super busy and they don't get back to you, and then you ping them again. But people have always been very accessible, and so just reach out.
You have a good story?
General advice.
Sure. Not getting into the
good-
specifics.
A good story. Unfortunately
No,
not.
okay. All right.
But you're like, oh yeah, just ping that director. I would say my advice for starting out at any organization, but in particular large companies, would be kind of get a feel first for like what the vibe is. Like that might not be the vibe of that company to just ping a director, right? You could end up ruffling some feathers of someone higher up than you, right? So just like kind of feeling out, okay, oh, this company, I can totally just message whoever and my boss doesn't care. All right, this company, we have to
Chain of
kind
command.
more of a chain of command, right?
Yeah.
So kind of feel it out and see what the culture is at the company that you're at would be my advice.
Okay, step number 1, vibe check of your new employer. Question from the audience, by the way, folks at home, you can drop questions in the chat. Folks here, we're going to take questions from the audience in like 2 minutes. Woohoo! Okay, question from Sherry. And I feel like Jennifer, you probably know the answer to this one. Any tips on recruiting a segment of new customers, so people who've never been active with your product, but you have an extremely limited budget, and so like agency recruitment is definitely out the window?
So hard.
You could do guerrilla research. So in our case, that would be like literally going to a mall and talking to people. We don't frequently do that, but we have. It definitely requires people to be, I would say, not so shy, right? You're just walking up to strangers and being like, hey, can you give feedback on this? But you will get some great feedback. And then I would say it's nice to still have some sort of like gift card or something that you're giving the person, not necessarily for your brand, like a Visa gift card, just to thank them for your time, for their time. And then other thoughts would be, I would say the remote research tools out there have really come a long way over the years. And so it might actually be a lot less expensive than you think to get prospective customers recruited using a tool. So maybe look for one that doesn't have like an upfront subscription cost.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know of someone who worked at a media company in Canada that, I don't know if you know this in Canada, just like in Chicago, it gets cold in the winter. And there's a big underground thing called the Path that connects a lot of buildings downtown. They went into the cafeteria and they brought this big cardboard like kiosk thing that they made with like Sharpies and cardboard boxes. And it's like, we would like to talk to you about your like apps, whatever you're using. And just, they had so much foot traffic there. They could have been interviewing thousands of people if they wanted to. So, find high volume traffic place that's relevant. And that could work.
Yeah, be careful. We did the same thing one time and got kicked out by the police for we just didn't want to.
The police.
They're like, this is not what this area is for. Keep it moving. Kind of thing. But that's not typical. I guess the only thing that I'll say is
the police. Brad, what else was going on, man?
This was okay. This was not McDonald's. This was when I was at the agency. Is much smaller, so
okay.
Can be a little bit more risk. I guess the only word of caution that I'll say is if y'all have been doing this for a while. You probably recruited on Craigslist. I mean, I don't know. I've done things like infiltrated Facebook groups and Reddit groups, asked permission from the admins, to see if you can source things like that. But when you're at a big company, you have to be very mindful of people's personal data, and you're opening up a lot of risk to them if you do kind of go through some of these kind of recruiting processes that are a little outside of the norm, cheaper, faster. So I'd say just be aware of that and just be very respectful of the people that are
Rule number 1: don't get fired. Right?
Don't get
I
fired.
was gonna say it's harder at Microsoft to recruit than any place. At Groupon, we could just pull list, and as long as they had opt-in, and it was fine. We have a lot of constraints. First of all, we have tons of data. We can look at aggregate data. We cannot recruit and reach out to people based on their patterns. So
really, like,
no,
wow,
we're very privacy, security. We are not spying on you. That is part of Microsoft, and so the only kind of loop around it is if we had some kind of broad recruitment strategy and people replied to opt in, then we could look at their data and pair it up and say, is that the right person? But we cannot say, hey, this customer, we talk about tenants, this tenant is exhibiting this behavior, let me reach out to them. So it makes a lot of challenges. We own LinkedIn, but we don't advertise studies on LinkedIn. We can't. So there's a lot of, it gets back to those relationships again. When you're in the enterprise space, our PMs have relationships with different companies, as do our leadership. There are the adoption people. We just did conference research at the Microsoft 365 conference last week intentionally, because there we can sort of recruit people. And we're trying to build our own panels, which is something I did at Groupon, but super easy. It's really tricky when it's a new product. We do use user testing. Like if I want a SharePoint author, no problem. If I want to do something new in this AI space, it's a little trickier. fortunately, there are other programs. We have something called Compass, which is a research customer-driven initiative that people throughout the organization can use. So a lot of that co-pilot work we did was with Compass. But yeah, there's a lot of rules. You have to be careful. There are privacy rules. You just can't do things that you might do at a smaller company. And so it's challenging, but you build those communities and then you do research through them.
Definitely don't get fired. Don't
Yes,
break
don't
those
get fired.
rules. The privacy ones, don't
Yeah.
break those. Other ones, maybe. That one, no. Do we have any questions in the audience here? Yes, right here. What's your name?
Yeah.
Yeah, Nicole, let's start with you because that's pretty relevant. But
Yeah,
Jada wants
I'll
to
tell a
know.
story. I'm not-
Jada, just so I can repeat
Oh,
here.
sure.
Jada wants to know how, because you're such a large company, so many brands, many types of customers using lots of different things. How do you have that cross-functional thing? Are you guys learning from LinkedIn? LinkedIn's learning from you? How does it work?
Well, I'll just say I was hired not to work on SharePoint, but to work on Viva products. And then they got reorged out. But I tell this story only to say, I'm like, oh, these are brand new products. I'm not going to have to know all that much. Wrong. SharePoint's a platform and Viva was built on it. And as I just mentioned, SharePoint is 40 years old. There's so much technical information to know. And then we're in the ecosystem space, right? What is your experience, particularly for Copilot? Like your experience, and sorry, I don't know if everyone knows Copilot. That's our generative AI tool. It's product. It's across much of the Microsoft experience. But now when you're thinking about how Copilot works in Outlook and Word, the Office thing, which is a different org than me, the experience throughout SharePoint or Teams, it's important, right? We need to have consistency there. So what was the question? Because I feel like I
Do you collaborate across?
Yeah. So, yes and no. AI kind of changed everything. We were moving fast to
Yeah.
be first to market. So the interesting thing is there's some AI researcher groups that meet on a regular basis and talk about like what's happening in their space. What are we learning from this segment? What are we doing? How are we measuring things like trust? There's been a lot of interesting experimentation there. I actually have not been driving that out, Alec, even though I did.
That's inappropriate. You
Believe
should
it
be
or not.
driving that. Just so
No,
everybody
it's
knows,
huge.
Nicole gave an incredible talk on how to measure trust when she was at
Groupon,
Groupon
yes.
back in the day, and it's like a masterclass in how to
Oh.
quantitatively measure what seems to be impossibly difficult things to measure, like trust or love or honesty and things. And
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, everyone's tackling it at the same time. So there's
Yeah.
a lot of meeting with these researchers. We use Teams a lot. We heavily use their products. So there are Teams channels and chats devoted to AI, Copilot, certain topics. So yes, and I think people are very much interested in working together. And then across just like UXR in general, there are things we do at Microsoft. Like we have a UXR day where researchers from across the company can participate and do sessions to learn from each other. So those are opportunities to see the latest and greatest and get to know people outside of your area. But I'm also just pretty lucky being in the org where I am that, as I said, there's like 30 to 40 of us, including there's even researchers out in China and India that we work with that don't report into us, but we cover and collaborate with. So there's a lot of opportunity to learn from each other, either specific things about what we're learning about customers and the product, but also just methodologies and how to work
Right.
and best practices.
Jennifer, do you have something?
So this question definitely resonated with me because it's something we're always kind of having some challenges with, right? So each brand stakeholder, right, is so immersed in understanding the customer for that brand,
I mean,
right?
like coach is interested in
Like
coach.
is interested in coach, Kate Spade is interested in Kate Spade. But there are, similarities across brands, right? And so A lot of this is just about like how you're kind of framing up insights and communicating the insights, like, oh, hey, we did this study for Kate Spade, but really think that these insights are going to be really relevant to you guys as well, wanted to share it with you, right? It's all about like how you communicate it. And then also just keeping in mind, like, okay, like a customer's mental model for cart and checkout, right? Is that really going to be different depending on, which premium or luxury brand? Like there might be some tiny nuances maybe around like, buy now, pay later stuff or things like that. But overall, like in terms of somebody understanding the structure of a page and, information hierarchy, that is going to be pretty darn similar. So a lot of it's just like educating your stakeholders too.
That makes sense. Do you have any other questions in the audience here? Okay, a bunch. Sir, in the middle there with the white shirt. Yeah.
I just wanted to ask, how do you
Oh, good grief. Here we go.
Well, I can tell you, if
So,
not-
sorry, just question.
oh, sorry.
How's AI changing research?
Well, actually, some members of our team are looking at how we can use AI as a research tool. So that's a whole other thing. I would say evaluative research becomes very important in a probabilistic framework, right? So it's not just the interactions on the page, but what is the model actually going to do? What are the questions or prompts people are going to ask? What are the things they're trying to accomplish? How is it responding? So in some of the early days, there were things that we had to fix quickly, like Copilot in meetings, it's doing its grounding and reasoning off the transcript. Well, if I don't know your gender, I might misgender you. If I can't handle your accent, I can have all kinds of misinformation and bad summarization, not because Copilot per se, but the translation. And then there's the Copilot piece, right? If you know about generative AI, one of the big things we worry about is we call them fabrications, not hallucinations, because we don't want to be ableist at Microsoft. So when the model is going to invent something that's not real. So all of these things, like testing the actual product, becomes very important. And it actually reminds me of something I meant to say earlier, especially in Microsoft. Use the product, use the ecosystem. This is when I'm realizing, what's happening in Excel is a very different experience than some of the work I do in SharePoint that's not authoring, but is about like extracting information from documents and document libraries. And so, we're trying to build this tool that automatically extracts information and puts it in a column. And I was like, ooh, that's really confusing, because Excel does something very similar. It's called the same thing, and the expectations are different. So you really have to use your product. There's so many times where I'm like, ooh, I'll give you a quick example. Just to recruit people for our research conference, we used Microsoft Forms, and I broke it in so many different ways. And it's like, okay, we got to find the Forms people and send them all this information. And then we used invites through Outlook, and it broke in other different ways. Like just really pushing your products. We tend to heavily use our products. So important. Don't leave that information to yourself. I'm kind of like a poker. I'm like, this is wrong, and I'm going to keep poking at someone until they respond, because that holistic experience is so important.
This is why it's important to build trusted relationships
Yes.
early on. So when you send this in lines, Brad, do you have any thoughts on how the research practice might change with AI? Especially now that you have one researcher for every 250.
Yeah. So the way that I think about, AI in general, at least right now, is that it's a tool. It's not something that's going to replace us. It's a way that we can be more efficient, do things a little bit faster, not have to worry about some of the minutia of smaller tasks. And if you avoid that tool, then you'll probably get left behind. So that's the way that I think about it, not in a way where it's antagonistic, like, oh gosh, the machine brain is going to defeat us and we're all going to be gone, but it's how can we use it to be a better, more effective, more efficient version of ourselves and work on higher, value things than some of the categorization things, summarization stuff that you can just kind of pump into one of the AIs and it'll give it to you.
Love it. Did you have something on the AI? Drop it. Yeah, let's do it. Let's go.
I think one thing I've been thinking about a lot with AI is just customer privacy, and just basically if, for example, let's say you're uploading a bunch of transcripts or raw videos from sessions, like, all right, is that going to be used for anything else? So just, I think right now I'm kind of just watching, seeing how things pan out, and I just think it's not, in terms of what I've played around with so far with UX research, AI tools that do some of the synthesis for you, I haven't been impressed. I'd be like, this is not accurate, And I think one thing I am also thinking about, right, is, for example, with the democratization of UX research, if you're having a product manager or a designer doing their own study, like making sure that they're not relying too heavily on some of like an AI generated summary, because they might not know how to spot like the inaccuracies with it, or like kind of nuance the findings a bit from what the AI gives you. So I think there definitely needs to be that like human plus AI to get the best kind of
Yeah, for sure.
efficiency and then valid results.
I would say I've seen a couple of demos recently where I'm like, oh, you could do that now. Cool. And I would say that it would be wise to not avoid this and dismiss it, because currently a lot of the things are not as I could do that better, right? For sure. But there are some parts of the job, probably parts you don't like doing because they seem a little bit mundane and repetitive, that I would be shocked if a good proportion of that stuff wasn't being done by those kinds of tools soon.
I do want to just echo something Jennifer said, super important. Like, if you're going to use this tool, there's a lot of startups now. You need to know if they're training their models on proprietary data. This is an advantage of Microsoft. We do not do that. So you want to, it's fine for AI to summarize that information. It should not be part of their models, right? Otherwise, you are exposing whatever it is you're working on to this company. So that's something to be careful about.
For the first time in your life, you better read those terms of service. I'll tell you that right now.
I mean, that's one of the advantages, right, of Microsoft. So we have your data. We can ground it. We can throw it through the graph and do things personal to you, but we don't train our models on that data. So very, very important to think about that. And then, yes, verification, trusting. It's not quite where it should be. I think any good researcher is going to do a better analysis and synthesis than or even a summary than often what AI can do. One thing I think that is kind of helpful that I've used a lot, if you're creating a report, Copilot is surprisingly good at making your language more concise or precise. And so think about it like that. You're not having it do the work, but maybe it can help you to generate a better report that's going to be more persuasive to your product teams, because it's helping to really, you work with it and it helps to refine your thinking and how you're framing it. So that's one way to think about it, but not doing the actual analysis yet, or not leaning on it too heavily.
There you go. I feel like we should end it there. Please give a round of applause for our three wonderful panelists. If you're here in person, you guys stick around a little bit. We're going to hang out for a bit, so feel free. We have some delicious food and beverages just outside there. They've made me promise that they'll hang around for 3 hours to answer every question. No, sorry, I made that up. For those of you who are interested, we have a couple of really exciting research events coming up, biggest of which will be UXRConf, so you should definitely check that out. If you want to come in person, there's still a few dozen tickets available. It's in San Francisco. But if you can't make it out there, you can tune on online remotely for free, so definitely check that out. And if you have any thoughts about this event or any other ones, please feel free to reach out to me. My email is alec@joinlearners.com. And if you had a great time, maybe we can do it again next year, maybe a little bit bigger, maybe a little bit more fun, maybe a little bit more food. Yeah, all right, cool. Have a wonderful evening, everyone.